Welcome everyone to today's B2B sales masterclass. I'm so happy that you could carve out this hour of your time to invest in your sales skills, your sales strategy, and make sure that you are getting like the best out of yourself and your team to hit those targets. I was really inspired to do this masterclass because I ran it with my female founders accountability group. If you don't have a similar group, I really recommend getting one. And we were all kind of talking about how challenging it's been to sell to businesses this year. A lot of businesses are facing layoffs, budget cuts. And if you are a service provider selling a product into a business, whether that's talks, training, consulting, anything focused on people development, you're probably finding that it's so much harder to do this work than it was a year or two ago when we weren't facing a cost of living crisis, when we weren't facing layoffs. So I did this masterclass for them, really leaning on all the sales skills I'd learned at companies like Amazon and Airbnb, and it went really well. They really enjoyed it. A couple of them managed to like close partnerships in the next few weeks just off the back of the advice that I shared. And I realized that there's probably more folks out there that want to learn these best practices too. So what I wanted to advise, since you're going to get a recording of the session as well as the sales deck, which contains homework for you, I'm not expecting you to do the homework during this hour. This hour is very much me teaching you and also answering the questions that you've submitted in advance. However, given that there is homework in the deck, I would kind of suggest that for this live session, you just sit back, be a sponge, absorb my words, think about what the words I'm sharing bring out in you in terms of reflections on your own business, reflections on how the year has gone. Just do everything you can to be present in this moment and listen and not put pressure on yourself to take notes and try to remember everything. Then when you get the recording later today, my advice would be to block out an hour or two over the next few days and go through the recording with the deck, with the homework questions, and actually pause at each section and challenge yourself and whoever helps you with sales on your team to answer each of the questions that I've posed in the homework. I think doing that will help you stay accountable and also like stay adaptable. You know, the number one thing with selling to businesses is that you need to always be adapting to the business's needs. When you are B2B, you're never constant because businesses are changing all the time. Their needs are changing. They're reacting to their investors. They're reacting to their employees. So if you want to stay relevant and valuable, you need to acknowledge that that change is happening all the time. And you need to keep your offering relevant and fresh so that you're always up to date with the conversation. I know some folks just joined. Don't worry, you haven't missed much. I've just been talking about what we're going to cover today. I also invite you to open up the deck that I've shared in the chat. But yeah, with that said, let's jump into it. So I'm going to toggle on and off between sharing my slides and just having my face on screen. Hopefully that works for you. If at any point you get technical difficulties or you can't see anything or you can't hear me, let me know in the chat and I'll do my best to accommodate. So what makes me qualified to teach you about sales? If you're not familiar with my work, I started Hustle Crew in 2016 and I spent a year fundraising. Investors told me no one is going to buy anti-racism training. That's just an admission of guilt. No one's going to invest in programs that develop their women. That's just going to be an admission of sexism. Investor after investor said this idea will never work. No business will ever buy diversity and inclusion training and consulting, multi-year partnerships. That's not something that people want. And it meant that I ended up turning Hustle Crew into my side hustle because girl had bills to pay. Living in London is expensive. But whilst running Hustle Crew as my side hustle, I built my personal brand online. Someone said to me, perception is reality. So I created this perception that, you know, Hustle Crew was thriving, that my work was valued, that my opinions were important. And through this work of storytelling about my experiences as a Black and Asian woman in the corporate world, in the tech world, my learnings about how to challenge racism and sexism in the workplace, talking about this on Instagram, social media, and even on my podcast, Techish, people started to notice. And I soon found myself in Stylist, Forbes, even featured in Financial Times' most influential leaders in tech. And I remember being in Afrotech, the conference in America, and waking up, West Coast time, and seeing all the messages come through as I turned my phone off airplane mode, that I'd been featured on this list in the Financial Times. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is so crazy, especially given Hustle Crew isn't really making that much money right now. But that was such an inflection point. And over the next few years, leaning into those accolades and really pitching courageously to businesses, I was able to secure six-figure partnerships with the NHS, Mayor of London, Sky, Comcast, multi-year partnerships that allowed me to scale my team, hire amazing facilitators, and deliver, the very anti-racism training, anti-sexism training that investors told me no one would ever want to buy, that no one would ever want to invest in. And in 2021, we hit $1 million in revenue. And that was such a mind-blowing moment for me, because I kind of thought, this idea that I had, that so many people kind of shredded to bits, has not just been validated, but it's been able to, create jobs and opportunities for people that I really respect and admire, from my community, a community that's historically marginalized, underserved, and underrepresented. So a real moment of pride for me. And as of 2022, I've been able to work on Hustle Crew full time, paying myself a much better salary than any of these, male dominated startups ever did. And of course, because I am my own boss, I'm not really throwing microaggressions my way or making myself feel bad for being a woman, or judging, my hairstyle on that day or whatever it is. So things are going pretty well. And I hope that with the wisdom I share, you can get to this level of, growth and comfort in your businesses too. So this is the agenda for today. As I said, you have a copy of the deck. So if you're working across two screens, especially because I'm going to be toggling on and off, you might feel more comfortable having it open in another window. But we're going to start with the key numbers. And as I said, for every section, you have homework to complete afterwards. So we're going to talk about the money, conversion rates, timings, and then we're going to deep dive into every stage of the sales funnel. The sales funnel, if you don't know, is this lovely little V-shaped diagram that kind of talks about how things go from conversation at the top of that funnel all the way down to a confirmed booking, payment, purchase that you're invoicing for. So we're going to talk about the top of that funnel, the middle of that funnel, and then finally that bottom of the funnel, the best bit, because that's where you close the deal. I'm going to spend a bit of time answering the questions that you submitted in advance, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the one-to-one coaching that I'm going to be making available. So hopefully that all sounds good. If it doesn't, tell me in the chat now. Otherwise, I'm going to take your silence as, enthusiasm and move on. So why have I chosen these three topics as the focus of today's workshops? Ultimately, if you can master or mistress all three of these topics, you will be winning in sales. So knowing what the most important numbers are in your business, talking about them transparently with all the stakeholders involved in growth, reviewing them at regular intervals, whether that's monthly, quarterly, annually, will keep your business healthy, will keep your business growing. These are the best practices of early stage startups with crazy goals set on them by VCs. These are the best practices by small businesses, corporates, enterprises. The thing about sales, I should say, is that data is your best friend, and we often forget that. So you and your team should absolutely be aligned on these metrics, and you can use everything from the data you have about your company so far, all the way through to competitor data from conversations, to market research to help you understand, where you should be at. So the first thing is money. What are your revenue targets, for 2024, for 2025? How much money do you actually want to earn? And that could be, a moonshot number that you come up with, but it could, realistically just be a number that reflects, growth from last year, a realistic percentage of growth from last year, or it could be a number that reflects all of the costs you need to cover, plus the markup that you'd like to have to keep a healthy runway in the business, to pay yourself a decent salary. Within that revenue target has to be an understanding of deal size. What kind of clients are you working with and how much do they spend? I'm going to go into each of these in more detail. So again, don't worry about remembering everything. Money is also about pricing. Very few companies have like standardized pricing, whether that's a menu that is backed up by the costs, whether that is, packages that reflect, the standards of competitors, the standards your clients are expecting. it's really important, again, for you to just have alignment on that and make sure that when you land on the numbers, you stick to them for a consistent period of time so that you can actually measure your actions against the results. Like, this is our revenue for the year. This is what our prices are for the year. At the end of that period, you can then look back and go, did that work? What did we learn? Price is too low, price is too high, targets unrealistic or not. But these are the kinds of conversations that you should be having. In the middle is conversion rate. And I talked about conversion rate in the masterclass I did with my accountability group. And I was actually shocked by how many, of us in the room were actively tracking our conversion rate. And the reason it's important to understand the percentage of conversations that actually turn into a payment, right? So out of the 10 conversations you have with different companies, 2 are becoming actual invoices you send out. Okay, great. You have got a 20% conversion rate. The reason why it's important for you to track that and review that, honestly, monthly if you can, quarterly if you can't, is because you do not know if you're actually having enough active conversations. Many of us are sort of just keeping the same conversations cooking, cooking, cooking. But that might not be enough to get us to our revenue targets and to get us to our goals. So if you're not aware of, like, okay, historically, last 6 months, last year, how many of those conversations, let me track in my Google Sheet or my CRM, whatever it is, how many of those conversations actually turn into an invoice? If you don't know what that number is, then how do you know you're having enough conversations right now? And if you're not hitting your sales target, I can guarantee you probably just don't have enough leads. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can get more leads in the pipeline, and also how you can get those leads converting into sales when they go quiet, when they start ghosting you, etc. Finally, do you understand the timing of your industry, of your sales cycle? If I think of some of the contracts that Hustle Crew won, especially with government, it took us over a year to go from an initial intro call, like, hello, we're interested in rolling out anti-racism training to our managers, whatever it is. It literally took over a year to go from that very first conversation to actually getting to the point where the training was confirmed, the invoices were being sent, and we were talking about logistics. Now, with some smaller companies, that happens very quickly. Okay, little startup, we've got an event next month. We want you to come and facilitate it. That could be a matter of days, even weeks. What's the case in your business? What's the case with your kinds of clients? Are you assuming all clients make the same, decisions in the same amount of time? And if so, isn't that quite a dangerous assumption to make? So yeah, these are all the things we're going to cover, and I'm going to go into a bit more detail about each of these stages as well. But yeah, let's just start with money for now. Again, feel free to jump into this section on your own screen if it's easier to do that. Let's say you want to make 300K this year. Well, that is roughly 12K per month. But how much does each client spend, right? If you actually think of that 12K per month, or 48,000 pounds per quarter, how much is that actually divided across your different clients? Are you going to have lots of small deals, a really high volume of small deals? Or are you hoping that that 48K per quarter is going to be made up from one giant whale of a contract, because you can find an enterprise or a scale-up company that's ready to lock you in for, a whole year's worth of work or multiple years worth of work? These are the questions that you should be able to answer. And also, even if you don't know for sure, you can at least start forecasting things, modeling things, guessing things, like, okay, well, we have more access to smaller companies, so I'm going to assume this revenue is going to come from many, many, many small companies. Or it might be that you actually used to work in scale-ups, used to work in enterprise. That's where your network is. So instead, you're going to say, actually, I'm going to try and secure like a few big whales, even though it's the long game, because that's where my network is. Now, of course, there are risks to either one. There was a point in Hustle Crew where we were relying on just a few big contracts. And when those contracts don't get renewed, there's a huge revenue gap to fill. Over the last year or two, I focused more on having a higher volume of smaller deals because, they are more likely to renew. It's a smaller expense to the business. And also, when we lose them, it's less painful. I don't need to think about whose hours I've got to cut, or who I've got to lay off to make up for that falling revenue. So these are questions that hopefully you can start thinking about and answering. And then the next thing is to think about, what's your pricing structure and is it sustainable? Many companies, especially if you're just starting out, just use costs plus a markup for profit margin. This is how much it costs me to run my business, salaries, overheads, etc. This is how much time, this campaign will take to create, to run, to build. And I'm going to add a 40% markup, a 50% markup, a 20% markup, and pass that on to the client. And of course, that markup is what will become your income, what will become your runway, so you can keep the lights on for a few months. But if you are more of like a consulting based company, or a company that's really focused on adding value to the company's brand, the mission, the people, I put Hustle Crew in that category, you might do more of a value based pricing based on how you help grow the biz. So for example, the average cost of recruiting someone, in terms of like if someone quits the company, a woman who faced sexism, a Black woman who faced racism, it's at least £25,000. So it's at least £25,000 to replace someone. So an argument could be made that if we design and deliver a program for managers, that means that they are going to be able to retain underrepresented talent. It's worth at least £25,000. And that's a cost that we can justify. So you should be able to come up with pricing that is sustainable and that you can justify in your conversations with clients. So I've left a bit of homework here for you. And as I said, the homework is something that I'm not expecting you to be able to answer right now. It's something that I just want you to be able to return to when you come back to this recording, going through this recording with other people on your team, going through this recording maybe during like a strategy session. This is, why I've given you the deck. But yeah, before I move on from this section about money, I just want to say, often women are not ambitious enough when it comes to setting our revenue targets or when it comes to setting our pricing. And I think this is like a really important moment to remind us of the wise words of Cindy Gallop. So Cindy Gallop, if you're not familiar with her, is like the most badass 60-something woman, super sexy, super confident. She has a company called Make Love Not Porn. And one of the things that she says is, when it comes to pricing, especially if you're offering a service as a speaker, as a consultant, is that you should say the highest number you can think of without laughing. Now, I know you think that that's crazy, but after I heard Cindy say that at the wing, someone asked me what I would charge for an hour of inclusion consulting. And I thought of what Cindy said. And I remember that I'd heard an engineer in Silicon Valley say that he charges £1,000 an hour. Well, he was $1,000 an hour. So when this person said, how much would you charge for an hour of consulting? I was actually charging £500 an hour at the time, but I was like, let me just say 1,000. And I was like, I will charge £1,000 an hour. And this person kind of went, okay, that's a bit high. Would you discount it a bit if I bought more hours? They didn't like say, oh my God, I'm not going to work with you, or whoa, that's ridiculously expensive. They just kind of like, oh, okay, that's a bit high. Let me negotiate this a little. So that's proof of the pudding that you never know what money's on the table. You never know what is available, and you can always negotiate down. So, start high and let the client, the customer, feel like they're winning when they negotiate you down. So if you are using currently a cost-based pricing model, increase the markup. But if you are offering consulting, service, value, I really recommend going for that values-based pricing model, where instead you talk about what costs you are preventing the company from incurring. A great example is employment tribunal. People right now, women especially, who are being laid off when they are pregnant, or laid off when, they complain about a manager that, was sexist towards them, are taking their employers to tribunal and earning tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. If your guidance, if your advice, if your content can educate leaders in such a way where they are not going to end up in court defending their toxic actions, then an argument could be made that the value of what you bring to the table is worth hundreds of thousands too. So I just really want to remind you to not undersell yourself. A number is just a starter. It's not where you land. So start high, because you will always be negotiated down. But if you start low, you've got nowhere to go. Most of my business comes from referrals. So it's very important for me that our price is high. It's very important to me that we are known as expensive, but worth it. Because if we become known as the cheap option, we have very little opportunity to grow. I know that I'm selling a premium product, but it's worth it. I believe that my team and I can deliver a British Airways first class experience, not a Ryanair cheap flight to Malaga. And I hold us accountable to that. So if you believe that you can do that too, then you should really do the same. Okay, so let's just jump back into the slides. So yeah, do this homework afterwards with your team. Focus on this about pricing, think about revenue, and see how far you go. So let's talk a little bit about conversion rate. I already touched on that a little bit. It's really important that you understand what percentage of conversations turn into a booking. So let's say 10% of conversations turn into a booking. If you want to book 10 more clients, then you need to be having 100 conversations on the go. Now, I know that sounds like an intimidating number, but the thing is, if you're creating content, pushing it out on social media, a lot of those conversations are already happening, just not actively or explicitly. If you want to have more targeted conversations, you can find leads using tools like Email Hunter and LinkedIn. In my opinion, especially when you are selling to businesses, especially if the budget that you are going for isn't like a pure supplier thing, like we deliver water bottles for your filter, or we, I don't know, store your cloud data. If it's something that's a bit more nuanced, something in the like learning and development space, something in the employer branding space, something where the return on investment is very subjective per company, then it might be better for you to actually generate leads through content marketing. So do some storytelling, get on stage, get on podcasts, host free events, educate your target audience on the problem that you're solving so that they can see the value in the work that you're doing. And that will be a way for you to bring more inquiries into your pipeline. So again, back to the homework, some of the things I want you to be thinking about on this topic of conversion rate is, have you researched online to find the conversion rates for your industry? Are you tracking the number of inbound leads you're getting each month or each quarter? Are you generating enough content to generate inquiries? So at Hustle Crew, I am using a very standard Google form to track my booking inquiries. And that means it goes into a Google Sheet. So every week, every month, I can go, okay, how many inquiries did we get this week? Did we get this month? The powerful thing about that is that over the last few years, it's also helped me understand what are the busier periods where we tend to get inquiries. That might be around cultural events like Women's History Month, Black History Month. It might also be around times where budgets are renewed. It might be around times where there's a hiring drive. That's when there's a demand for, bias in recruitment training. It doesn't take complexity to get this data. It just takes consistency. So make sure that you are holding yourselves accountable. Like, are we tracking the conversations coming into every social media channel we manage? What's coming into Instagram? What's coming into LinkedIn? Are we tracking that? Are we following up with them? Are we paying attention to them? When people are engaging with my content, am I following up? Am I asking them if they want to learn more or know more? Those are all potential leads to help you get your conversion rate. If anything I'm saying isn't clear, please jump into the chat and let me know. I'm keen to ensure that this lands and everything makes sense to you. But hopefully as you do the homework, and of course, Google around on anything that's not clear, jump on YouTube, whatever, like if you still want to get a bit more clarity on this. But yeah, hopefully as you go through this homework, you'll really start to understand that you either don't have enough leads or you're just not tracking all your potential leads across all the different channels where you're active, in one place. So let's talk a little bit about timing. Now, timing is really important because if you actually think of what is happening in sales, and I'm just going to like toggle off screen for a second. In my last role, oops, see a little question coming through. In my last role, in my last in-house role, I was a decision maker. So as a VP of belonging, it was my job to allocate a budget of around 120K a year to different partners that helped us reach our goals. And what I realized when I was in that role is that most people who were selling to me, so I sort of became the customer Hustle Crew, most people who were selling to me didn't really understand what it's like to be a budget holder in an organization. Just because I hold a budget as a VP doesn't mean I'm the only person that needs to sign off spend, especially if it's like 5-figure spend, or really anything over £1,000. It's got to go through an approval chain that went to the C-suite. It's got to go over to the finance department to make sure that it meets all the different requirements of a supplier. And the reason that I'm explaining that to you is because we can be very like myopic when it comes to sales. Okay, I've got that call with Helen. I've got to convince Helen that we're the right partner. And if Helen likes it, then Helen's going to sign off the budget. No. What about Helen's boss? What about Helen's boss's boss? What about finance? What about accounting? What about procurement? You know, depending on the size of the company and the way the company works, there are so many people who have to say yes to you. And guess what? You're not going to meet most of them. So Helen is your strongest ally, but you need to use Helen as a way to understand, how does decision making work in your company? How long does it take to close a deal? What information do I need to share with you? So this is what this section is all about, helping you understand the timing that's going on the other side of the table, helping you understand all the chains of decision makers on the other side of the table, because you're not going to meet all of them. But in theory, to get this deal closed, to get that money sent over to you, you're going to have to get a yes from everyone. So asking questions like, how long is it going to take for a decision to be made? How soon do you want this work to get rolling is really important, but also timing the conversation when it makes sense to. If you are doing work that's focused on increasing engagement, you know, there are times in the year where there's going to be a focus on that, whether that's Pride Month, whether that's Women's History Month, whether that's, you know, a team away day. There are also going to be times where it's just bad to ask because the people who say yes or who need to say yes are not going to be there. You know, August is a time where a lot of people are offline. It's not a bad thing. That can be a time for you to prepare for pitching in September. So when it comes to timing, it's really important for you to think about those things. And in this homework section, I'm going to challenge you to go deeper. So have you analyzed past data to see where your busy and quiet periods are? Have you looked at the org charts to understand the structure of the team? And, you know, are you asking those questions that are like super key to help you learn that? So now I want to jump into the actual sales funnel. So this is sort of, you know, imagine literally a funnel, hence the name. And we're going to start at the top of the funnel. If you prefer to think of it as a timeline, you know, like a horizontal line, you know, it's the journey of a lead. So it's that journey from, hey, I saw you at that networking event and I really love to learn more about your business and see if we can bring you into the company. How do we go from that initial conversation all the way through to, cool, here's the 20K, really looking forward to kick this off. So the first thing you need to do is have a system that helps you track the journey from intro to pitch to negotiation to decision. I don't care what system you use. That is for you and your team to decide. I have been through them all: HubSpot, Salesforce, Google, you name it, Trello. And where we've landed now as a team is Notion. I can see that there's a question about how to track. There are no right answers for how to track. That's like asking, what's the best notebook? What's the best pen? It's a very personal decision based on how people work. We've been through so many iterations of tools in my team over the years, and Notion is the one that we have finally landed on. We've been through different communication tools, Slack integrations, Zapier integrations, you name it. But our current workflow works for us, and it's using Notion with a few Zapier automations that go to different Google files, and also Google Chat as our main comm system. But you know, whatever you decide to do, it's just really important that you have a system that helps you track. Okay, so I've had that intro. Now I'm going to start preparing that proposal. Okay, now I've shared that proposal with them. Okay, now it's been a week since I shared that proposal with them. I'm going to follow up with them and see what happens, so that you can see not just, you know, where they are, but also, you know, how likely they are to become a close partnership. Because if it starts to look less and less likely that they are going to become a sale, then you need to go back to that conversion rate question and go, okay, I guess I need to put more leads into the top of my funnel. So at the beginning of the journey, you are just in the intro phase. And I think the biggest mistake people make at this stage is doing too much talking. Now, I know that's quite ironic since I'm talking to you guys, but this isn't a sales call. You come to learn about sales. It's very natural, because you're enthusiastic and because you know your business so well. It's very natural to use that intro call to say, oh my gosh, we can do this, and then we can do that, and we worked with this company, and here's an example, and here's an example, and here's an example. But again, as someone that used to sign off budget in a company as a VP, I can tell you, when I have been running from meeting to meeting all day long, the last thing I want to do is sit on the other side of a table or Zoom call and listen to someone who I barely know tell me, lecture me about their business and about their story. Because my attention is waning. I want to tell you what we need so that you can tell me if it's relevant and if it's helpful. And so many people fall into this trap of getting overexcited, talking, taking up all the airtime. And, I would be on sales calls where I would literally just glaze over and start managing my inbox, replying to Slacks. So this is why I want to like save you from that. Use that intro call to ask questions, understand the problem, understand their values, understand what worked before when they reached out to similar suppliers, what didn't work, what success would look like, what, how they'll measure success, what would make them happy if this works out, because that is language that you can recycle and regurgitate when you get to your pitch, when you get to your proposal. All of this is in the deck, but you just make sure that you are a sponge in that call. You are not using that intro to tell them your life story. You are using that intro to get information about them. And remember, systemic bias is real. So if the decision maker sitting across from you doesn't necessarily share your lived experiences, your cultural affinities, it's even that more important to ensure that any unconscious bias they could potentially have towards you is counteracted by your kindness, your positive energy. Be relentlessly pleasant and shine your light. Yes, it's annoying that we have to do this. We have hormonal cycles, all this kind of stuff that can get in the way of doing that. But at the end of the day, you have a goal, and that goal is your sales target. So think of that when you are smiling your way through the intro call. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the intro, that the homework that I've set for you on this intro section, but hopefully these can be really helpful reminders and tools that you can use to assess your current processes. Have a checklist or script for these intro calls that helps you make sure you're getting all the info you need to make a perfect pitch. Make sure that you are also showing off your personality and really building rapport with this person. This is also your chance to understand if they're going to be a good fit for you. So don't think about the intro call as just an opportunity to wow them and win them over. Also use that intro call to assess them. We're a values-based organization. We're creating space for incredibly uncomfortable conversations about privilege and systemic oppression. I want to make sure that the companies that we're working with, can handle that and are going to enjoy that. So I'm also using that intro call to get to know them and get a bit of a vibe read on them. So remember that this intro call very much works two ways. And this is your opportunity to see if you're going to be, a good partnership together. But a lot of this is covered in the homework that I've set for you. The final thing I'll say before I move on to the next section is it's really important at the end of that intro call that you are also scheduling, if you can, the proposal walkthrough. So, what I like to do is use that time in the intro call to get to know them, get to understand what they are dealing with. And then I'll say to them, listen, I'm going to go away. I'm going to put together a tailored proposal, put together like a menu of options, a few different packages that we can collaborate on. And I just think it would be really valuable if we actually go through that together, because it's going to be a way for me to get your feedback in real time, make sure it's got all the information that you need to go back to your team, to your boss, and get an answer. It will only take 10 minutes. I'll literally just run through the slides, run through the pricing, and then just kind of get your input on whether, there's anything else to add, to clarify, to adjust, because we really, really want to work with you, and we really want to get this right. So most of the time, people will agree to that because you're kind of making their job easier. Instead of emailing them a deck where they then have to email you asking for changes, you can do it all in one go. So I really recommend using that intro call to give them a bit of insight into your process and next steps, and actually getting their availability then and there so that you can do that. Someone asked, how did you go about landing your first clients when you had no referrals and you needed to rely on cold outreach? So this is why I was talking about using social media as a way to do content marketing. So like, if you're unfamiliar with what content marketing is, it's this idea of like talking about your business so that people come to you, right? It's that kind of build it and they will come strategy. And that is what I used to do at the beginning of Hustle Crew. I would talk about what we can do in the workplace. I would share stories of like, here's this woman that sued her employer for this. Here's a company that lost X millions, in a lawsuit over that. Here's a product that completely bombed because the team wasn't diverse. So I would talk about these things online, and then people would approach me and say, oh, will you come and do a talk about that in my company? So this is how I was able to get my first partnerships. I also did a lot of like stuff for free. Like I had a standard lunch and learn, and it was like a really short 30-minute talk. And I would go to different HR leaders in different tech companies and say, hi, like next time you have the team in for lunch, can I come in and do this like free lunch and learn? It's all about how to support women in tech, how to promote greater diversity and inclusion in tech. And I think it would be really valuable. And if you like it, then I would really appreciate if you can, introduce me to other companies or book me for a longer workshop. It really depends on what you're selling, but I personally have never found cold outreach to be effective because I'm selling a very niche product in a very potentially triggering space. So what has worked for me as someone selling anti-racism, anti-oppression training is instead to talk about the importance of this work and then wait for like-minded people to come to me. Cold outreach is probably easiest with people who already know you or who already have trust in you, because people don't really want to spend money on people they don't trust because that's their reputation on the line. Like if someone brings you into the business and it bombs, they might get a bad performance review. So trying to understand and empathize with the other side of the table could get you thinking more creatively about how to attract leads. So with that in mind, let's jump into the next section of slides. So you have finished the intro call, you have bit a sponge, you've soaked up all you can about the company, you understand how they work, why they work this way, what they're going to need from you. You've secured a time, a quick 10-minute slot to walk them through the deck. Now the time has come. What are you going to do? Well, hopefully by now you've been on Canva or pitch.com and made something beautiful. You have whipped together some testimonials that validate your work. You've got something that's visually appealing, with easy to read, that shows off all the cool ways you can help them and help them achieve their goals. Hopefully you have regurgitated their words. If you're bad at taking notes, just hit a new voice memo and record what they're saying and then listen to it later. If you're only using it to help you build your proposal, I don't think that's illegal, but maybe double check with a lawyer. But, regurgitate everything they said so that when they are hearing you say it, when they are sharing it with their team, they're like, this person really gets us. This person knows exactly what we need. And also show up with main character energy. As a founder, you are the best salesperson for your business. Tony Blair runs his own political consultancy. He shows up for every intro call because he wants people to be like, damn, Tony's working on this, I'm investing. And I think it's really important for you to really show that you have passion for this work, because that's what can set you apart from competitors. More often than not, companies are speaking to like 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 potential providers. And if you're one of those 10, how are you going to stand out? People want to work with people they vibe with, they get along with. So show up and infect them with your passion. And as you're going through the deck, here's the deck where I talk about our company, what we do, because I guess you're going to be sharing with people who aren't familiar with us. Here's where I talk about, the package. Let me just pause there. Does this make sense? Is there anything else I should add? By the way, this is how I've sort of reframed the problem that you're dealing with. Do these words make sense? Is there any data internally that I can add here that makes it more relevant? Ask for questions, ask for clarifications, get that affirmation and that reassurance that what you are saying makes sense and they're happy to move forward with it. Now, before you get to the price, it's really important that you frame that price. Like, okay, this is what we can do for the budget you've shared, but this is what we can do for more. This is what we can do for less. If you don't know what the budget is, start with something low and then go all the way up to the top, and just make sure you are always asking questions like, based on this pricing I'm sharing, is this realistic? Do you think this is something that your team will approve, your leadership will approve? And also, here's the thing about pricing. You can always say, I just want you to know that we would love to work with you, especially if this is true, right? Especially if you really do want to work with them. I just want you to know that when it comes to pricing, because we want to work with you so much, we can be flexible. So if there's something that comes up later down the line when I'm not around that, it's too high, it's too low, the package isn't quite right, I would be so grateful if you would just let me and my team know right away. This partnership is worth so much more to us than the numbers on the screen. We think there's a real alignment here. We think there's a real long-term opportunity here. So if you do get some pushback, let me know, because we can be flexible. And that is giving people that opportunity that they can now think, okay, cool, you know what, actually it is a bit higher than the other people we're looking at, but we prefer you, we prefer your branding. So caveat your price, especially if you're following my advice and going in really, really high. Caveat those high numbers with that reassurance that you can be flexible. And companies love to hear that, and it makes them feel special. So next, negotiation. Negotiation is hard. It doesn't get any easier, but you can get more comfortable with the discomfort of pushing for high numbers and not backing down. It's really important for you to like pay attention to red flags. I saw something on Instagram yesterday, and it said red flags will never become green flags. And that is true in life, that is true in relationships, that is true with clients. If when the negotiation starts, people start playing dirty, being rude, being aggressive, I think it's really important for you to recognize those red flags when they come and ask yourself honestly, this is the best I am going to get of this client. Is this really the kind of company that I want to work with? Because if a company's like, we want your highest package for the lowest price, they're telling you that they don't value your time. And if they're not valuing your time at that stage, they're not going to start valuing it down the line. Red flags do not become green flags. So remember that during the negotiation. And remember that if you do decide to concede on anything, you are setting a precedent, right? So let's say the company's like, okay, we're happy to move forward at this price, but we want you to remove that and we want you to meet these terms and conditions. If you start off the relationship from a point of being on the back foot, that will probably continue. So it's really important that when you negotiate, especially if you're going down on price, you do not do anything that will make you lose money. You do not do anything that will earn you such a small margin it becomes demoralizing, or you don't do anything that ends up being like such a poor use of time, like something that's actually like taking up so much of your time because of the personalizations and the tailorings and the this and the that and the neediness of the client, that you're suddenly like, oh my gosh, I'm actually like suffering because of this partnership. And what I have found over the years of running Hustle Crew is that it's often the companies with the biggest reputations to ride on that will try and squeeze you the hardest. Look, people don't get rich for nothing, okay? People get rich more often than not through exploitation. And businesses are very happy to exploit other businesses, especially small businesses, little businesses, women-led businesses. So as you get to that negotiation stage, you have to get to that point where you actually start to realize saying no to the wrong opportunities lets you say yes to the right opportunities. And it took me years of painful partnerships, money losing partnerships, therapy creating partnerships to realize that. So don't let yourself get bullied at the negotiation phase, and only, acquiesce and give in to things where, you feel like it's going to be worth it. But if your gut is telling you no, if there are already red flags there, walk away. The final thing I want to say is, this is where systems can help you, because you're very rarely going to get an answer right away. So make sure that whatever system you're using, whether it's Notion, look, it could even just be Google Calendar. You don't need fancy tools. Someone else was saying that they're overwhelmed with the workflow. It's so hard to track things. Make it easy to track things. If you're always in Google Calendar, every time you send an email, set a Google reminder, a Google task, a Google event 1 week from that day, 2 weeks from that day, saying it's 2 weeks since you sent that email. Have you heard back? Have they followed up? Find a system that's frictionless and simple and works for you. In my case, I use Notion notifications to tell me when it's been X days since I last contacted someone. And I have lots of email templates as well. So I don't need to type the same email over and over again, shortcuts, things like that to make it easier. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the middle of the funnel. Again, back to my analogy. The middle of the funnel is, where leads are on that journey when you've already had that introduction, you've already shared the proposal and the pricing, and now you're kind of just waiting to get an answer. And this is the hardest part of sales. I'm not going to lie. Like when I worked for other companies doing sales, it was hard. When I work for myself doing sales, it's also very hard. But here is what I have learned. What makes middle of the funnel more effective is when you can offer value. As someone who was a decision maker, as someone who had access to a budget and was constantly being pitched, invest in our company, bring us in for training, bring us in to do talks, whatever, I would be exhausted by the emails that were like, hey, Abdesi, just checking to see you got my email below. hey, Abadesi, it's been, 1 week since we spoke. Do you have any answers? Do you have any answers? Do you have any answers? If I had an answer, obviously I would tell you. Like, why would I be sitting here withholding valuable information? Like, oh, I got that budget signed off, but I'm not going to tell them until they ask me 10 times. Like, no, I probably don't have an answer. So it means that maybe for me to get an answer is going to be another little task on my to-do list to tell you if that budget's been signed off or if we've made a decision. I've got to chase my boss, or I've got to chase the other decision maker that it's stuck with, or I'm going to have to chase finance. And I hate talking to finance because they hate talking to me and it's awkward and all this kind of stuff. Why should I go out of my way, out of my long to-do list of things, my long list of priorities, to make the answer to your question a priority, to make your email a priority? What's in it for me? And what I found is when people went out of their way to make my job easier in some other way, it did make me want to follow up with them. So if someone was like, hey, Abadesi, I saw that you just posted this role on LinkedIn. I wanted to let you know that I've advertised it on our Instagram page or in our LinkedIn community. And I hope you will get some interesting people applying. I'm sure you're really busy, but if you did have any updates on our last conversation, that would be great. And suddenly I'm like, well, that was really kind of them. That's really sweet. Oh, let me check in on, the status of that budget so I can share an update and let them know. So if you want to do something that gets that conversation out of that dead silent zone and into like engagement, give freebies, repost their content, invite them to a webinar. You probably noticed that Hustle Crew does a lot of free webinars. Well, we do that because it's part of our sales strategy. When we put out a free webinar, people register for it. That's what gets us new leads. When we have a webinar upcoming, I also use that webinar as a way to re-engage existing conversations. Like, hey, Helen, just wanted to let you know we've got this webinar coming up. Please come along, invite your team. Instead of just being like, hey, Helen, just wondered if you had any updates on the proposal, I can invite them to something. So middle of the funnel is something that takes a lot of experimentation. What works for me might not work for you, but keep trying different things and see what works. In the homework section for sales, I've got a bunch of different things for you to explore. And I really, really do encourage you, if you're still feeling a bit stuck, to just look at what your competitors are doing. Look at what your competitors are doing. You are not the only company like you selling to businesses in your region, in your continent, in the world. So if you are lacking creativity, struggling to think of an experiment, look at what your competitors are doing and try and gauge which of these experiments are sustainable for you, realistic for you, and try them. If they work, great. If they don't, also great, because you learned that they don't work and you can try something new. So yeah, this kind of brings us to the end of the sales funnel journey. I really hope that you have found value in this. I wanted to make sure I saved a bit of time at the end for the questions that were submitted in advance. And I would also encourage you to use this time to ask any other burning questions that I haven't covered. So yeah, just to recap, at the top of the hour, I said that we were going to talk about key numbers, so like revenue, money, conversion rate, timing. I also said that I was going to talk about every stage of the sales funnel, from the very beginning of inquiries and intros all the way through to pitching, sharing proposals, all the way through to negotiating, and then finally developing that middle of the funnel so that you can finally get an answer, whether it's a yes or a no. So if anything isn't clear, now is your time to ask. Someone has asked, how did I balance building Hustle Crew alongside working full time? I do think that working full time gives you really good insight into how to be a B2B business, because you understand how businesses work, how they make decisions, and how they prioritize. I definitely had a bit of a addiction to work. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to recommend it either. So it wasn't an issue for me to work on the weekends or say no to festivals and parties so I could work on my business. I very much felt that this was a period of my life where I was just going to grind so that in the future I wouldn't have to grind as much. So I guess the way that I balanced it was that I didn't balance it. I just made sacrifices. And, you lose friends, you lose opportunities, but you gain wisdom and financial freedom. And it's up to us on each of our individual life journeys to make the decisions that we feel align with our values, goals. So those are my decisions. And yeah, so far, no regrets. Okay, cool. So if you are following along in the deck, I'm now on to the sort of quick fire question section. So I'll just flash up on the screen super quickly. Quick fire questions. You might have also noticed there's a little URL in the bottom left corner here. If you want to do any of that homework together on a 20-minute call with me, or do a more deep dive into any of the questions that you've posed, I am giving away a 20-minute sales strategy call. All you have to do to win this is complete the feedback form linked here, tinyurl.com/Abadesi class feedback. Before the end of the week, I will be selecting you. I'm going to use like a random generator online to pick the lucky person. But yeah, if you're keen to do 20 minutes, you and me, talking about whatever you need to, even just doing some of the homework together, whatever's helpful, please fill out the feedback form. So, quick fire questions. Someone asked, how can I get better at tools and time management? As I've said, it really comes down to experimenting with lots of different tools with your team to then find out which ones work for you. And as I mentioned, over the last few years, we have gone through every tool imaginable. Unfortunately, you don't really know what works until you learn what doesn't work. But if I can give you one piece of advice, if something isn't serving you, bun it down, like get rid of it as quickly as you can. Like I genuinely wish we got rid of Slack a lot sooner, because it actually became a distraction. And once we went away from Slack and focused on having like better email flows and better Google chat flows, we really gained a lot in productivity. And I think time management, there's a lot of advice that you'll get out there from lots of different people, but more often than not, people agree that time blocking is the best way to work. So you can block out specific time for sales calls. You can adjust something like Calendly or any booking system to reflect that. And then you can also block out time for admin. So if you are rubbish at tracking and rubbish at admin, then why don't you incentivize yourself to do it by scheduling a 20-minute admin block before your lunch hour, before something that you're looking forward to that actually forces you to do it. Or you can do it in a group accountability way. Do like a live admin hour. Everyone jumps on 1 hour, screens on or off, but you're online together and you just power through it. Unfortunately, everyone is so unique. Really, what's going to work for you is what works for you based on what doesn't work for you. How can I hire better? With hiring, it's really important to be like crystal clear with what your expectations of the role are. This goes into your job description. This also goes into any assignments that you ask people to do. At Hustle Crew, I'm a big believer in questionnaires based on our values and based on the tasks that we have and the tools that we use. So I literally ask people, are you comfortable using Notion, using Google Docs? Are you comfortable being held accountable to work? Are you comfortable being called out if you mess up? Because this is how we operate. So give people a chance to understand how you operate, be super transparent. And, if someone isn't working out, just get rid of them and move on. Because when you are a small business owner, when you are a founder, you will soon realize that time is your most precious commodity. And if there's someone on your team that's taking up more time, it's not fair on the other people who need your support, but it's probably also not fair on you, because you also have responsibilities. But you need to sleep and you need to eat and you need to live. So someone asked about ghosting. This is back to my middle of the funnel talk, and it's really important for you to do that homework, because a lot of the homework will help you answer that question. If you're struggling to, show the value, someone else asked also below, how do I show leads that we are worth it? If you're struggling to convince clients of the value of your work, why it's really important to work with you, and if you're also struggling to keep that conversation going, it's probably because you are not giving them enough to come back to you, or not giving them enough to trust you, right? So again, remember those stories I shared from when I was a budget holder and I was a decision maker. I was putting out my own fires. I was the only Black woman VP in a 4,000 person company of mostly white men, mostly engineers. I was going into meetings, fielding microaggressions left, right, and center. I was just trying to survive, honestly. And I'm sure to the many people who were pitching to me or waiting for answers for me, it felt like I was ignoring them. I wasn't respecting them. I wasn't listening to them. The reality is I just had bigger fish to fry. And more often than not, that's the case with the people who are ghosting you or pushing back on you. So how can you make their job easier? If you did the work at the beginning during the intro call, then you should be framing the conversation in a way that's relevant to them, and you should be offering them freebies that align with their goals. A little bit of ghosting is like just standard sales. Like people can't always prioritize you. You also have to get to the point where you're ready to let a lead go and assume that it's a no. The silence is a no. If you've chased something 3 times, 4 times over a period of a few months, the silence is doing the talking. And that's time for you to think about the conversion rate and think about getting more leads into the top of your funnel. Can I do a webinar? Can I create a free resource? Can I go to networking events? Can I do a podcast? Can I post a YouTube video? Can I do something that talks about this work, that gets people connecting with me about this work, so that I can now start engaging them in a conversation? If you're selling to businesses, you should be on LinkedIn. You should be talking about your work on LinkedIn, because people go on LinkedIn and that's where they try to find out how they can be better at their job. Someone asked, what if your clients are only financially driven and only want to know your price? So I think with that, you just have to be confident about pushing back and being, uncomfortable, basically, right? Like if you walk into a really, really fancy shop, and again, it depends on the kind of business you are, but you walk into a fancy shop, they don't even have prices on their items. And they're sending a message, if you need to know the price, then we're not a good fit. And maybe that's the same journey that you need to go on. Either you're setting yourself at a price point where people are like, just tell me what you cost. And you're like, okay, wow, you're really price sensitive. Well, we're cheap, so great, we're a good match. Or you're setting yourself, putting yourself in the market position where when people are like, I just want to know the price, you're like, honestly, if the most important thing to you here is the price, we're not a good fit, because I'm coming in at a premium level. I'm really adding value for the long term. I'm looking for long-term value, long-term partnerships. But I can't tell you where you want to position your brand. That's a thing for you to decide. But I know I've been on that journey myself. And when people are like, just tell me the price, just tell me the price, I was like, do you know what? Go somewhere else, because we ain't cheap. And we don't like cheap people. Someone said, are there any AI tools you'd recommend for getting new leads? I'm the only full-time member and very little time for finding new leads. I haven't tried doing this, but it might be worth going into ChatGPT and asking for, what are the companies that are aligned with X values, or who are the companies that are hiring? Or, another cheat is actually like thinking about the role that you usually pitch to, and then like just going on LinkedIn and like using like a Boolean search, like keywords plus keywords, to like generate a list of people. Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, the most successful accelerator, said that you have to do things that don't scale when you're a small business. And I really do believe that that's true in sales. Most of the effective sales strategies are not high volume strategies. And I know that's not the answer you want to hear, because you just want something that can help you blast out 1,000 people at once. But that's going to be 1,000 emails that don't get read. Like if you're really serious about having meaningful conversations with people that end up spending money with you, you actually have to be willing to spend time to like find the right people who will be aligned with the work that you do, and a way to tailor your approach to each of them. But yeah, I don't use AI currently, so I also just be transparent about that. It might be something you just want to experiment with. Okay, final few minutes before we log off. I think if you want to get recurring bookings, I'm on the bottom of the slide. Be open and upfront from the beginning. Are you looking for a long-term partnership? We like to, work with people long-term. This is language I use at Hustle Crew. I've never used referrals at Hustle Crew because I think people can get in trouble for like referring certain businesses and getting money back. I think referrals work for B2C consumer businesses, but not B2B, because there's a conflict of interest, anti-bribery stuff. So it's probably worth looking into that. And then finally, someone asked, how can I tap into my network, with grace? And I think the way to do that is, again, going back to that middle of the funnel talk. How can you add value in that conversation? Hey, come along to my webinar. And by the way, if the webinar is helpful, if they do come along a few weeks later, you can follow up and say, I'd love to find out if you'd be interested in more support, a talk, a training, a consulting, whatever it is. So thank you, everyone. I feel like I've been speaking really, really fast to try and make sure that I get through everything for you. An hour isn't a ton of time, but I wanted to give you all the best bits to help you level up your sales strategy. I do hope that you had a chance to share feedback. Final thing for me, I'm doing a special offer which ends this week. I will put it into the email when I share the recording. If you like what you heard, but you want to go a bit deeper, or you want to actually see my sales tools, see my systems, see my templates, get coaching on any specific issues you're facing, shoot me an email after the session. I only have like a few spots, but what I wanted to do was offer you one-to-one coaching for a super limited low price before I like launch this officially to the wider public. £60 for an hour, or you can buy a pack of 3 for £50 each. We'll do everything that I've been doing so far, but in greater detail specifically for you. I'm only going to run this offer until Friday, again, for folks who've signed up today. And then I'm going to make it available to the greater public. So yeah, if you found this helpful and you want to know more, get involved. But yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. The recording will be coming your way. Good luck. Stay positive. Don't be disheartened. Yes, it's a lot of work, but it's so worth it. Finding the right clients that believe in you and value you is going to be so much better than finding hundreds of new clients who are disrespectful and are lowballing you. So yeah, keep experimenting, stay creative. And remember, selling to businesses is hard. It requires constant adapting. But anything that you can do to find joy in the little moments, celebrate the little wins, is going to keep you motivated to carry on. So yeah, thank you so much for making time. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions or whatever. Shoot me an email, follow me on social media, and see you soon. Bye. Take care.